I'm Megan, 28, and I never thought my own parents would try to kill me and my 10-year-old daughter Emma. We just wanted a normal family camping weekend. Instead, after a short hike to see a waterfall, we returned to find everything gone. The tents, the cars, our family. All that remained was a note. This is for the best. Trust me. My heart dropped as Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, where did everyone go?" That's when I realized my own family had left us to die in the wilderness. Before I tell you how we survived and got our revenge, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to hear the full story of betrayal and survival. The tension with my family had been building for years, but I never imagined it would come to this. My parents, Harold and Barbara Mitchell, were always controlling, with rigid expectations for their children. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Pennsylvania, appearances meant everything. My brother Ryan always fit the mold perfectly: straight-A student, college athlete, married his high school's sweetheart Tara, had the perfect son Tyler, and joined our father's accounting firm. Then there was me, the disappointment, the black sheep. I married young at 21 to David, who my parents never approved of. He was an artist, not a professional with a real job, as my father would say. When I got pregnant with Emma shortly after, my parents acted supportive on the surface. But the disapproval was always there in their tight smiles and backhanded compliments. "At least you'll have a beautiful baby," my mother had said during my pregnancy, "even if your life isn't turning out quite as planned." 3 years ago, when David and I divorced, I expected some support from my family. Instead, I got judgment. "We told you he wasn't right for you," my father said over dinner the week after David moved out. "Maybe now you'll start making better decisions." The divorce wasn't even my choice. David had fallen in love with someone else, a fellow artist he met at a gallery showing. The betrayal cut deep, but I worked hard to create a stable life for Emma and me. I got my teaching degree, found a good job at an elementary school, and managed to provide a loving home for my daughter despite the challenges. 2 months ago, I received a job offer that would change everything: a position at a prestigious school in Seattle with significantly better pay and opportunities for advancement. When I told my parents about my decision to move across the country with Emma, the real trouble began. "You can't take our granddaughter away from us," my mother said, her voice rising higher than her usually controlled tone. "What about Ryan and Tara? Tyler and Emma are so close." They weren't, really. We only saw Ryan's family at mandatory holiday gatherings where Tyler spent most of the time playing video games while Emma tried unsuccessfully to engage him. "You're being selfish, as usual," my father added. "Running away won't solve your problems, Megan." I stood my ground. This isn't about running away. It's about creating a better life for Emma and me. The arguments continued for weeks, with Ryan and Tara joining in to convince me to stay. The pressure was relentless, but I held firm. Then, surprisingly, my father called with what seemed like an olive branch. "We should spend some time together before you leave," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "What about a family camping trip to Blackwood Forest? The whole family, you, Emma, your mother and me, Ryan, Tara, and Tyler. One last hurrah before you go." I was suspicious, but hopeful. Maybe they were finally accepting my decision. "Emma would love that," I said cautiously. "Great," he replied. "Ryan is already planning everything. We'll handle all the details." Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. The secretive phone calls between my father and brother that stopped when I entered the room. My mother's strange comment about learning valuable lessons when we discussed the camping trip. Ryan asking detailed questions about my wilderness experience, almost none, and swimming abilities, moderate at best. But I was so desperate for family harmony before our move that I ignored these red flags. Emma was ecstatic about the trip, especially spending time with her grandparents and cousin in the great outdoors. "Maybe Uncle Ryan will teach me to fish," she said as we packed our bags. "And Grandpa said there's a beautiful waterfall we can hike to." The drive to Blackwood Forest took nearly 3 hours, the last 45 minutes on winding dirt roads with no cell service. When we finally arrived at the remote campsite, I was struck by just how isolated it was. No other campers in sight, just dense forests surrounding a small clearing near a serene lake. "It's perfect," my father said as we unloaded the cars. No distractions, just family. That first day seemed normal enough, though the conversation felt forced. My mother kept commenting on how much Emma would miss her family in Pennsylvania. Ryan barely spoke to me, focusing instead on setting up the 3 tents, one for my parents, one for his family, and one for Emma and me. That night around the campfire, as Emma roasted marshmallows with Tyler, I caught my brother and father exchanging a look that sent a chill through me despite the warm flames. But I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. If only I'd trusted my instincts, I might have prevented what came next. The next morning dawned bright and clear. After a breakfast of pancakes cooked over the fire, Ryan suggested we all go fishing. I'd never been particularly interested in fishing, but I went along, wanting to participate in the family activities. Emma was excited to learn, and surprisingly, Tyler actually engaged with her, showing her how to bait the hook. We spent a couple of hours by the lake, the adults making stilted conversation while the kids compared the size of their catches. Emma managed to catch a small bass, and her proud smile momentarily made me forget the underlying tension. Around noon, as we walked back to camp with our modest catch, my father put his arm around my shoulders, a rare gesture of affection that instantly put me on guard. "You know, Megan," he said, "there's a beautiful waterfall about an hour's hike from here. You should take Emma to see it after lunch. It might be your only chance before you leave for Seattle." "That sounds nice," I replied cautiously. "Will everyone be coming?" "Oh no," he said quickly. "Your mother's ankle is bothering her, and Ryan and I need to repair one of the tent poles that broke this morning. Tyler gets bored with hiking. But you and Emma would enjoy it. There's a clear trail the whole way." I looked to Emma, who was already bouncing with excitement at the idea of a special expedition with just me. "Please, Mom. Can we go?" Before I could answer, Ryan approached, pulling something from his pocket. "Here," he said, handing Emma a small compass. "Just in case you need it." I frowned. Why would we need a compass if there's a clear trail? Ryan shrugged. "Always better to be prepared in the wilderness. It's not like you have much outdoor experience, Megan." I bristled at his condescending tone but accepted the compass for Emma's sake. She immediately began examining it, turning it in different directions and watching the needle move. After lunch, as Emma and I prepared for our hike, I noticed my mother packing away much of the food into coolers. "We don't want to attract bears," she explained when she caught me watching her. Her hands trembled slightly as she secured the cooler lids. The trail to the waterfall was indeed clear and well-marked, though steeper than I'd expected. As we walked, Emma chattered about school, her friends, and her excitement about our move to Seattle. About halfway there, however, her tone changed. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I heard Grandpa and Uncle Ryan talking last night when I went to use the bathroom." I slowed my pace. "What did they say?" "Something about teaching you a lesson you wouldn't forget. Grandpa said it was the only way to make you understand." She looked up at me, her blue eyes troubled. "What did he mean?" A chill ran down my spine despite the warm spring air. But I forced a reassuring smile. "Oh, you know how Grandpa talks. He's probably still upset about us moving." "Don't worry about it, sweetie." Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded and continued walking. I should have turned back right then, trusted my instincts and my daughters, but I didn't want to believe my family would do anything truly harmful. The waterfall was genuinely spectacular, a 60-foot cascade of crystal-clear water plunging into a rocky pool. We spent about half an hour there, taking photos and dipping our toes in the frigid water. Emma collected some pretty stones, and for a little while, I forgot my concerns. It was mid-afternoon when we started back, and I found myself hurrying our pace, an inexplicable urgency pushing me forward. When we finally emerged from the forest trail into the clearing where our campsite had been, I stopped so abruptly that Emma bumped into me. The clearing was empty. No tents, no cars, no coolers or camping chairs or fishing gear. No family members. "Mom?" Emma's voice was small. Where is everyone? I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. My first thought was that we had somehow taken a wrong turn, emerged at the wrong clearing. But no, there was the fire pit we'd used that morning, now just cold ashes. There was the distinctive fallen log where we'd sat for breakfast. This was our campsite. And everyone was gone. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in the trees. Dad? Ryan? No answer except for the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I approached the center of the clearing where our picnic table had been. In its place was a small folding table I hadn't seen before. On top of it sat a sealed plastic container and a single sheet of paper held down by a rock. With shaking hands, I picked up the note and read the message written in my father's distinctive handwriting. This is for the best. Trust me. I read it again, unable to comprehend. Then I opened the plastic container. Inside was a small tent, a flashlight, a lighter, a basic first aid kit, and what looked like enough food for maybe 2 or 3 days. They had left us. Deliberately. In the wilderness, miles from civilization, with no car and no cell service. Mom? Emma's voice cracked as she tugged at my sleeve. Mom, what's happening? Where did everyone go? I turned to my daughter, her eyes wide with confusion and the first glimmers of fear, and I had no answer that made any sense. My own family had abandoned us to the wilderness, and I had no idea if they ever planned to come back. The reality of our situation hit me like a physical blow as I watched the sun beginning its descent toward the tree line. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and we were alone in the wilderness with minimal supplies and no way to contact help. Mom, are they coming back? Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. I knelt in front of her, forcing myself to appear calmer than I felt. I'm not sure what's happening, sweetie, but we're going to be okay. First, let's see exactly what we have to work with. I emptied the plastic container onto the ground and inventoried our supplies. A small 2-person tent, a flashlight with extra batteries, a lighter. A basic first aid kit containing bandages and antiseptic wipes, a small pot, 2 bottles of water, a box of granola bars, some beef jerky, a bag of trail mix, and 2 apples. It wasn't nothing. But it wouldn't last long. Emma picked up the compass Ryan had given her earlier. At least we have this, she said. I nodded, touched by her attempt to find something positive. That was smart of you to keep it safe. Let's set up the tent before it gets dark. My hands trembled as I tried to assemble the unfamiliar tent. I'd never been an outdoorsy person. That was more David's territory, and it took several frustrating attempts before we managed to erect the small shelter. It looked flimsy against the vastness of the forest surrounding us. Should we try to walk out? Emma asked as I secured the tent's final stake. I considered it briefly. No, honey. It's getting dark, and we don't know which direction to go. The road was winding, and we drove for a long time on dirt paths. We could end up getting more lost. I didn't add that we had no idea how far we were from any main road, or the fact that Emma would never make it that far on foot. As dusk settled around us, I got Emma settled in the tent and searched through my backpack, hoping to find something useful I'd forgotten. At the bottom of the bag, tucked into a side pocket, I found a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there when we left for the waterfall. Under the beam of the flashlight, I unfolded it to find my mother's handwriting. Megan, this intervention is necessary. You've always taken the easy way out, running from your problems instead of facing them. Taking Emma away from her family is just another example of your selfishness. A few days in the wilderness will teach you the responsibility and consideration for others that you've always lacked. We'll return when we believe you've learned your lesson. Barbara. The paper crumpled in my fist as hot tears of anger and betrayal spilled down my cheeks. An intervention? They had abandoned a mother and child in the wilderness as some sort of twisted lesson? Memories flooded back. My father's criticism when I changed my college major from business to education. My mother's disapproval when I chose to work through my marital problems with a therapist rather than keeping it in the family. Ryan's smug face when he told me I should have tried harder to save my marriage. This was the culmination of a lifetime of control and manipulation. A final desperate attempt to force me to bend to their will. By putting not just me but my innocent daughter in danger. Mom? Emma's voice came from inside the tent. Are you crying? I quickly wiped my tears and ducked into the tent. Just a little frustrated, sweetie. But we're going to be fine. Emma was already in her sleeping bag, clutching her stuffed rabbit that she'd fortunately brought in her backpack for the hike. I'm scared, she whispered. I heard wolves earlier. I slipped into my own sleeping bag beside her and pulled her close. Those were probably just coyotes, and they're afraid of people. The tent will keep us safe. Why did they leave us, Mom? Did we do something wrong? My heart broke at the question. Absolutely not, Emma. You did nothing wrong. This is grown-up stuff between me and Grandpa and Grandma. It has nothing to do with you. Is it because we're moving to Seattle? I hesitated, then nodded. Partly. But that doesn't make this okay. What they did was wrong. Will they come back for us? I don't know, I answered honestly. But we're not going to just sit here and wait to find out. Tomorrow, we'll figure out a plan. As Emma drifted into an uneasy sleep beside me, I remained wide awake, listening to every sound from the forest around us. The distant howl of what I prayed were just coyotes. The rustle of nocturnal creatures in the underbrush. The whisper of wind through the trees that sometimes sounded disturbingly like voices. My mind raced through scenarios. We could try to hike out. But in which direction? We could stay put and ration our supplies, but for how long? Would my family really return as my mother's note suggested, or was that just another manipulation? And if they did return, what then? Could I ever forgive this betrayal? One thing became crystal clear as I lay in that flimsy tent with my daughter's sleeping form beside me. Whatever relationship I'd had with my family was over. If we survived this, when we survived this, I would never allow them near Emma again. With that resolution burning in my heart, I stayed awake all night, planning our survival and silently promising Emma that I would get her out of this wilderness safely, no matter what it took. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong that seemed obscenely cheerful given our circumstances. Emma was still asleep, her face peaceful in the soft morning light filtering through the tent fabric. I slipped outside, stiff from the hard ground and lack of sleep. The morning air was crisp and cool as I surveyed our campsite. In the harsh light of day, the reality of our abandonment was even more stark. I needed a plan, a systematic approach to our survival until we could find a way out. When Emma awoke, I had already organized our supplies and written out priorities in the small notebook I'd fortunately brought on our hike. Good morning, sweetie, I said, trying to sound upbeat. Ready for an adventure? Emma rubbed her eyes, momentarily confused before remembering our situation. Do you think they came back while we were sleeping? No, honey, but we're going to be fine on our own. I've made a plan. I showed her my list. 1. Secure water. 2. Maintain shelter. 3. Find/conserve food. 4. Signal for help. 5. Determine location/possible routes out. We're going to treat this like a survival challenge, I explained. Like those shows Daddy used to watch. Emma's face brightened slightly at the framing. Like Survival Masters? Can I help? Absolutely. You're my survival partner. First mission, water. I remembered from our hike that we'd crossed a small stream about 15 minutes from camp. Using Emma's compass, we set out to find it again, marking our path by tying strips of fabric from my spare t-shirt to branches. The stream, when we found it, was clear and running swiftly over rocks. I recalled from one of David's shows that moving water was safer than stagnant, but we should still boil it to be safe. We'll fill our empty bottles and boil the water when we get back to camp. I told Emma, who was already dipping her fingers in the cool stream. Can we catch fish here? She asked. Maybe. We'll try that tomorrow if we need to. Back at camp, I attempted to start a fire using the lighter and some dry leaves and twigs. It took multiple frustrating attempts before I managed to get a sustainable flame. Emma watched with wide eyes as I carefully built up the fire and placed our small pot of water on a flat rock in the flames. You're really good at this, Mom, she said. I laughed ruefully. Not really. I'm just remembering what I've seen on TV. Your dad would be much better at this. But Dad's not here, Emma said simply. You are. Her words gave me strength. I might not be a wilderness expert, but I was all Emma had right now, and I would not let her down. After securing our water supply, we turned our attention to food. We had enough packaged food for maybe 3 days if we rationed carefully, but we needed to supplement it. I remembered from our fishing expedition that there were berries growing near the lake. Let's see what food we can find, I suggested. At the lake, we found bushes heavy with small blueberries. I hesitated, uncertain if they were safe. Those are blueberries, Emma said confidently. We learned about them in school. They're safe to eat. I examined one closely. It did indeed look like a blueberry. And I vaguely remembered seeing Ryan picking some the day before. We collected as many as we could carry in my bandana. Our next challenge was more daunting. Trying to catch fish without proper equipment. Using a sharpened stick as a makeshift spear, I spent an hour attempting to stab at fish in the shallows of the lake. Succeeding only in getting wet and frustrated. Emma, watching from the shore, suggested, what if we made a trap instead? Like a net or something? It was a good idea. Using my limited knowledge and Emma's surprising creativity, we constructed a crude trap from branches and my shirt, placing it in a narrow part of the stream with some berries as bait. The rest of the day was spent reinforcing our tent with extra branches for stability, gathering more firewood, and taking stock of our surroundings. I found a large rock formation that might make a good landmark and possibly a better shelter if the weather turned bad. As evening approached, we checked our fish trap. Empty. Disappointed but not defeated, we adjusted it and decided to check again in the morning. That night, as we sat by the fire eating our carefully rationed dinner of half a granola bar each and some berries, Emma surprised me with her resilience. This is kind of fun, Mom, she said. Her face illuminated by the flickering flames. It's like we're pioneers. I managed a smile. You're being very brave, Emma. I'm not scared when I'm with you, she replied, leaning against me. Her simple trust nearly broke me. What if I couldn't get us out of this? What if something happened to her because of my family's cruelty? Day 3 brought new challenges. A rainstorm swept through mid-morning, soaking us both and nearly extinguishing our fire. I managed to shield enough embers under a large piece of bark to restart it once the rain passed. But our tent had suffered. One side had collapsed under the weight of the water, and our sleeping bags were damp. As I attempted to repair the tent, disaster struck. Reaching for a large branch to use as a support pole, I stepped in a hidden hole and twisted my ankle. The pain was immediate and intense, bringing tears to my eyes. Mom, Emma cried, running to my side. Are you okay? I couldn't lie. The pain was evident on my face. I've hurt my ankle, sweetie. I need to rest it. Emma, my 10-year-old daughter, who should have been safely at home playing with friends, immediately took charge. She helped me to a fallen log, brought me water, and then, with determination on her small face, began gathering the firewood I'd been collecting. Emma, you don't have to dash, I began. Yes, I do, she interrupted firmly. We're survival partners. Remember? When one person gets hurt, the other person helps. I watched, a complex mixture of pride and sorrow welling in my chest, as my little girl stepped up in a way no child should have to. She brought me firewood, checked our fish trap, still empty, and even tried to reinforce the tent herself. That evening, as I sat with my throbbing ankle elevated on my backpack, hunger gnawing at my stomach, I faced the harsh reality that we couldn't continue like this much longer. Our food was dwindling, my injury limited our mobility, and there was no sign that anyone was looking for us. As Emma slept fitfully beside me in our sagging tent, I made a decision. Tomorrow, injured or not, we would have to try to find our way out of this wilderness. Our survival depended on it. By the 5th day, our situation had become desperate. The small supply of food was completely gone, with nothing but a few berries to sustain us. More concerning than my own gnawing hunger was Emma's deteriorating condition. She had woken that morning with flushed cheeks and glassy eyes. I don't feel good, Mom, she mumbled as I pressed my hand to her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin confirmed my fears. She had a fever. Whether from exposure, contaminated water, or something else, I couldn't be sure. But without medicine, clean water, and proper shelter, her condition would only worsen. "It's okay, baby," I soothed, giving her some of our precious remaining water. "Just rest." While Emma dozed fitfully in the tent, I took stock of our situation. My ankle, while still painful, could bear weight if necessary. Our water bottles were half empty. The weather had turned colder overnight, suggesting another storm might be approaching. We needed help, and soon. "Fire," I murmured to myself. "We need a signal fire." Despite the pain in my ankle, I gathered as much green vegetation as I could find, remembering that green leaves and pine needles created more smoke. When I had a substantial pile, I carefully placed it over our small campfire, creating a thick column of white smoke that rose high above the trees. "Please," I whispered, watching the smoke drift upward. "Please let someone see this." For hours, I maintained the signal fire, alternating between checking on Emma and adding more green material to create smoke. My throat grew raw from the acrid fumes, and my eyes stung, but I persisted. This was our best chance. As afternoon wore on, Emma's fever seemed to worsen. She tossed restlessly in the tent, occasionally calling out for her father or mumbling incoherently. I used our dwindling water supply to dampen my bandana and place it on her forehead, but it seemed to provide little relief. Just as I was adding more material to the fire, a rustling in the underbrush sent me spinning around. 20 yards away, at the edge of our clearing, stood a black bear. It was smaller than I'd imagined bears would be, probably young, but still easily large enough to kill us both. It sniffed the air curiously, its small eyes fixed on me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly backed toward the tent, never taking my eyes off the animal. I'd heard conflicting advice about bears: play dead, fight back, make noise, but in that moment, all rational thought fled my mind. "Emma," I whispered as I reached the tent. "Emma, wake up. We need to move." Quietly. Emma stirred groggily as I helped her up. When she saw the bear, her eyes widened in terror, but she remained silent, instinctively understanding the danger. "We're going to back away very slowly," I murmured. "Then we'll climb that big tree over there." Step by excruciating step, we retreated from our campsite, the bear watching us with what seemed like curious indifference. When we reached the large oak I'd indicated, I boosted Emma up to the lowest branch, ignoring the screaming pain in my ankle. Then pulled myself up after her. "Keep climbing," I urged, helping her up to a sturdy branch about 15 feet off the ground. From our perch, we watched as the bear ambled into our camp, investigating our tent and knocking over the pot we'd been using for water. It seemed particularly interested in our backpacks, probably smelling the lingering scent of food. "Is it going to go away?" Emma whispered, her body trembling against mine. "Yes, once it realizes there's no food," I assured her, hoping I was right. We remained in that tree for what felt like hours, watching the bear destroy what little remained of our camp. Emma's fever made her drift in and out of consciousness, leaning heavily against me. I tied her to the branch with my belt, terrified she might fall in her weakened state. As dusk approached and the bear finally wandered away, the full weight of our situation crashed over me. Our shelter was in tatters, our few supplies scattered or destroyed, and Emma was seriously ill. I could no longer pretend we were having an adventure or that I had everything under control. Alone in that tree, with Emma sleeping fitfully against me, I finally broke down. Silent tears streamed down my face as I stared up at the darkening sky visible through the branches. "Why?" I whispered to the emptiness. "Why would you do this to your own granddaughter?" In my mind's eye, I saw my father's stern face, my mother's disapproving frown, Ryan's smug superiority. A lifetime of conditional love and manipulation culminating in this ultimate betrayal. "I hate you," I hissed through clenched teeth. "I hate all of you." As if in response, I heard Ryan's voice in my head. "You've always been weak, Megan. Always taking the easy way out." The hallucination was so vivid I nearly looked around for him before realizing it was just my exhausted, hungry mind playing tricks. But something about the imagined taunt sparked a memory. On the drive to the campsite, my father had mentioned something about a ranger station being just down the main trail. At the time, I'd paid little attention, focused instead on Emma's excitement about the trip. A ranger station. If it existed, if we could find it, we might have a chance. With new determination cutting through my despair, I gently shook Emma awake. Sweetie, we need to leave the tree now. The bear is gone. Emma blinked up at me, her eyes unnaturally bright with fever. Where are we going? To find help, I said firmly. I remembered something about a ranger station. We're going to find it. Getting down from the tree was a challenge with my injured ankle and Emma's weakened state. But we managed it slowly. Our campsite was a disaster. The tent collapsed, our backpacks torn open, everything scattered. I salvaged what I could. The flashlight, Emma's compass, a torn piece of the tent that could serve as a makeshift carrying sling. Then, using branches as improvised walking sticks, we set out as the last light faded from the sky. Which way? Emma asked, her voice faint. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the drive-in, the direction the cars had been pointing when parked. The main trail had to lead to the road eventually. This way, I decided, pointing east according to Emma's compass. Stay close to me. Using the flashlight sparingly to conserve its batteries, we stumbled through the darkening forest. Emma grew weaker with each step, until finally she couldn't continue. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I can't walk anymore. Without hesitation, I fashioned the tent fabric into a drag sling, placed Emma on it, and began pulling her behind me. The pain in my ankle was excruciating, but I ignored it, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other. You're the strongest person I know, Emma murmured deliriously from the makeshift stretcher. I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified, exhausted, and consumed by a rage toward my family that burned hotter than any fever. But I kept moving, dragging my daughter through the dark forest, determined that we would not become victims of my family's cruelty. As the night deepened around us and exhaustion threatened to overcome me, I made a silent vow. If we survived this, when we survived this, my family would pay for what they had done. Not just to me, but to an innocent child whose only crime was being my daughter. With that thought fueling each painful step, I continued through the darkness, my flashlight beam growing dimmer as the batteries faded, mirroring my own dwindling strength. I awoke to the gentle light of dawn filtering through the trees, momentarily disoriented. At some point during the night, I must have collapsed from exhaustion beside Emma's makeshift stretcher. My body ached profoundly and my ankle throbbed with renewed intensity. But something else had changed. Emma was sitting up, looking around with clarity in her eyes. Mom, she said when she saw I was awake. I feel better. I pressed my hand to her forehead. The burning heat of the previous day had diminished considerably. Not gone entirely, but markedly improved. Your fever's breaking, I said, relief washing over me. That's good, really good. As I struggled to my feet, wincing at the pain in my ankle, something caught my eye, a small wooden post with faded red markings. I limped over to investigate and felt a surge of hope. It was a trail marker. Emma, I called excitedly. We found a real trail. Emma managed a weak smile. Does that mean we're saved? It means we have a much better chance now, I replied, helping her stand. Can you walk a little today? She nodded determinedly. I think so. With renewed purpose, we began following the marked trail. Emma leaned heavily on me, but she was moving under her own power, which I took as an encouraging sign. I couldn't be sure if this trail led to the ranger station I'd remembered or simply connected to other hiking paths, but it was our best option. As the morning progressed, Emma's strength seemed to return incrementally. Her fever, while not completely gone, continued to recede. She even commented on the beauty of a cardinal that flitted across our path, the first sign of her normal curiosity returning. We had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when Emma suddenly stopped. Mom, I hear voices, she whispered. I froze, listening intently. At first, I heard nothing but the rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. Then, faintly but unmistakably, human voices. Hello. I called out, my voice cracking from disuse and dehydration. Is someone there? We need help. For a terrifying moment, there was silence. Then a man's voice responded. Hello? Who's there? Here. I shouted, waving my arms frantically despite the pain. We're here. Two figures appeared around a bend in the trail, a middle-aged man and a boy of about 12. Both dressed in hiking gear with proper boots and backpacks. The man's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm as he took in our disheveled appearance. My God, he said, hurrying toward us. Are you all right? We've been lost for days, I explained, tears of relief threatening to overwhelm me. My daughter has a fever and I've injured my ankle. Do you have a phone? Can you call for help? The man, who introduced himself as Marcus and the boy as his son Jason, quickly assessed our condition. No cell service out here, he said. But we're only about 2 miles from the ranger station. Jason, give them your water bottle and those granola bars from your pack. As Emma and I gratefully accepted the food and water, Marcus explained they were on a weekend hiking trip and had set out from the ranger station that morning. We can help you back there, he offered. The ranger can call for medical assistance. I nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. With Marcus supporting me and Jason walking alongside Emma, we made our way along the trail. The hike was slow and painful, but knowing help was within reach gave me strength I didn't know I still possessed. Marcus asked what had happened, and I gave him an abbreviated version, family camping trip. Separated during a hike, got lost trying to find our way back. I wasn't ready to explain the full truth to a stranger, the deliberate abandonment that had nearly killed us. When we finally reached the ranger station, a rustic but sturdy building with a radio antenna and a parked Forest Service vehicle, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked me off my feet. We had made it. Against all odds, we had survived. The ranger, a no-nonsense woman named Ranger Patricia Collins, took one look at us and immediately went into action. She helped us inside, provided clean water and proper food, and began assessing our medical needs. Your daughter's dehydrated, but her fever's mild, she told me after examining Emma. Your ankle's badly sprained. Possibly worse. I'm calling for medical transport. As she made the call on the station's radio, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly, holding Emma close on the station's worn couch. We made it, sweetie, I whispered into her hair. We're safe now. Within an hour, paramedics arrived in an all-terrain vehicle. They provided immediate treatment for dehydration, cleaned and properly bandaged various cuts and scrapes we'd accumulated, and prepared us for transport to the nearest hospital. As they were loading us into the vehicle, Ranger Collins approached with a concerned expression. Ms. Mitchell, I need to ask, you mentioned you were camping with family? Should we be looking for other missing persons? I looked her directly in the eyes. They're not missing. They abandoned us deliberately. My parents and my brother's family left us there with minimal supplies and no way to call for help. Her expression shifted from concern to shock, then anger. That's criminal endangerment, especially with a child involved. I'll need to report this to the sheriff. Good, I said firmly. They deserve to face consequences. At the hospital, Emma and I were treated for dehydration, exposure, and various minor injuries. My ankle was indeed severely sprained, requiring a walking boot and crutches. Emma's mysterious fever was diagnosed as a combination of stress, exposure, and a minor infection that responded quickly to antibiotics. The story of our abandonment and survival spread quickly. A local news reporter showed up at the hospital, and though I initially declined to comment, I eventually realized that public exposure of what my family had done might be the only way to ensure justice. The sheriff, a gruff man named Keith Donovan, interviewed us at length. Taking detailed notes and recording my statement, "I've been in law enforcement for 27 years," he said when I'd finished my account, "and I've never heard of anything like this. Rest assured, we will be investigating thoroughly and pressing charges." True to his word, the investigation moved swiftly. Search warrants for my parents' and brother's computers revealed damning evidence, emails discussing their intervention plan, searches for wilderness survival rates, and even a calendar entry marking when they planned to return to the campsite, 10 days after they'd left us. By that point, Emma and I had been moved to a comfortable hotel room paid for by a victim's assistance fund. We were recovering physically, though the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. On the 10th day after our abandonment, the very day my family had apparently planned to rescue us, Sheriff Donovan called. "Ms. Mitchell, I thought you should know. Your parents' and brother's family just arrived at the campsite. They're being taken into custody now." A few hours later, I stood in my hotel room watching the local news coverage. There they were, my father Harold, mother Barbara, brother Ryan, and his wife Tara, being led in handcuffs to police vehicles. Their expressions ranged from shock to indignation to fear. According to the news report, when questioned about their actions, my father had claimed it was just a lesson that had gotten out of hand. They had allegedly planned to return after a week, believing the experience would convince me to abandon my plans to move to Seattle. A knock at the door interrupted the broadcast. Sheriff Donovan stood there with a grim expression. "Your parents are requesting to see you," he said. "You don't have to agree." I glanced back at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time since our ordeal began. "Tell them I'll see them," I said quietly. "But not for their sake. For mine." The hospital room where the meeting took place was sterile and cold, much like the relationship that had led to this moment. My parents sat side by side, still in their outdoor clothes, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. Ryan and Tara waited in a separate room. I wasn't ready to face my brother yet. "Megan," my mother began, her voice wavering. "We never meant Dash." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice steady and cold. "You meant exactly what you did. You left a mother and child in the wilderness to die because you couldn't control me." "That's not true," my father protested. "We left you supplies. We were coming back." "In 10 days," I said. "Emma had a fever. We were attacked by a bear. If we hadn't found help, we would have died. And it would have been murder." The color drained from my mother's face. "A bear? Megan, we didn't know Dash." "Of course you didn't know," I exploded, my composure finally cracking. "You abandoned your daughter and granddaughter in the wilderness. What did you think would happen?" My father reached for my hand across the table. I pulled back as if burned. "We thought you'd stay at the campsite," he said weakly. "We thought you'd be fine until we came back. We just wanted to show you that you need your family, that you can't make it on your own." I laughed bitterly. "Well, you proved exactly the opposite. Emma and I survived despite you, not because of you. And we'll continue to thrive without you in our lives." "You can't mean that," my mother whispered. "We're your family." I stood, looking down at the two people who had given me life and then nearly taken it away. "Not anymore," I said firmly. "Family doesn't do what you did. Family protects each other. You're just people who share my DNA, and after today, you won't be sharing anything else with me or Emma ever again." As I turned to leave, my father called out desperately, "We can change. We can get help. Please, Megan." I paused at the door. "You should get help. But not for me, for yourselves. Because what you did wasn't just criminal, it was monstrous. And I will never, ever forgive you for putting Emma through that hell." Walking away from that room, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the burden of seeking approval from people who had never truly loved me unconditionally, who had seen me as something to control rather than someone to cherish. Back at the hotel, I found Emma awake and drawing pictures of trees and mountains. "Did you see them?" she asked quietly. I nodded, sitting beside her on the bed. "I did. Are they sorry?" I considered lying, protecting her from the harsh reality, but Emma deserved the truth. "They're sorry they got caught. They're sorry about the consequences. But I don't think they truly understand what they did wrong." Emma nodded sagely, with a wisdom beyond her years. "That's because they're broken inside, Mom. Grandma told me once that love means making people do what's best for them, even if it hurts. But that's not right, is it? I pulled her close, marveling at her insight. No, sweetie, it's not. Real love is supporting people even when they make choices you wouldn't make. It's about respect and trust, not control. As we sat there together, survivors of both nature's dangers and human cruelty, I knew with absolute certainty that our move to Seattle would now be not just a new opportunity, but a true fresh start. Free from the toxic bonds that had nearly cost us everything, Emma and I would build a life based on the authentic love we'd discovered in each other during our darkest hours. 6 months after our abandonment in the wilderness, Emma and I sat in the back of a courtroom in Pennsylvania, watching as the judge delivered his verdict. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law had all been found guilty of child endangerment, reckless endangerment, and attempted involuntary manslaughter. The court cannot overlook the premeditated nature of these actions, the judge stated firmly. To deliberately abandon a woman and child in a remote wilderness with minimal supplies and no means of communication demonstrates a shocking disregard for human life. My father was sentenced to 5 years in prison, my mother and Ryan to 3 years each, and Tara to 2 years with the possibility of parole after one. Additionally, permanent restraining orders were issued, legally barring all of them from contacting Emma or me ever again. As we left the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Our story had captured national attention, sparking discussions about family dynamics, control, and the lengths some people would go to maintain power over others. Ms. Mitchell, how do you feel about the verdict? A reporter called out. I paused, holding Emma's hand tightly. Justice was served today, but this was never about punishment. It was about protection, ensuring that my daughter and I can move forward with our lives safely. Another shouted, Do you have anything to say to your family? They're not my family anymore. I replied simply, Family is about love and support, not control and manipulation. Emma and I have found our real family in each other and in the community that has supported us through this ordeal. That community had indeed been extraordinary. After our story broke, we received an outpouring of support from the first responders who had helped rescue us, from victim advocates who guided us through the legal process, and from countless strangers who sent letters, care packages, and even financial contributions to help us rebuild our lives. A month after the trial, we finally made our move to Seattle, though to a different neighborhood than originally planned. For privacy and security. The school that had offered me the teaching position stood by their offer, demonstrating a level of understanding and compassion that reinforced my belief in human kindness despite what we had endured. Emma, remarkable in her resilience, adapted quickly to our new home and school. But the trauma lingered in subtle ways. She developed a fear of the dark, became anxious when I was out of sight for too long, and sometimes woke crying from nightmares about being lost in the woods. Dr. Leah Winters, our trauma-focused therapist, worked with us both individually and in joint sessions. She helped Emma process her fears through art therapy and guided me through the complex emotions I grappled with: anger, betrayal, guilt, and grief for the family relationships that had been irreparably destroyed. You're carrying a lot of guilt, Dr. Winters observed during one of our sessions. You believe you should have protected Emma from this. I should have seen the signs, I admitted, tears flowing freely. I knew something wasn't right with the trip, with how they were acting. But I ignored my instincts. Megan, she said gently, your parents and brother spent a lifetime conditioning you to doubt your instincts, to prioritize their approval over your own judgment. Breaking free from that conditioning is part of your healing process. Slowly, session by session, we began to heal. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. I learned to recognize and validate my own feelings rather than dismissing them as I had been taught to do throughout my childhood. For months after moving to Seattle, I found myself standing before a room full of strangers at a community center, sharing our story at a support group for survivors of family trauma. The hardest part, I told the group, wasn't the physical survival in the wilderness. It was accepting that the people who should have loved me the most were willing to put my child at risk to maintain control over me. A woman in the front row nodded, tears streaming down her face. After the meeting, she approached me hesitantly. "Thank you for speaking," she said. "I've been making excuses for my parents' behavior my whole life. Hearing your story helped me realize I'm not obligated to keep people in my life who hurt me, even if they're family." That conversation sparked an idea. With encouragement from Dr. Winters and support from local advocacy groups, I established the Mitchell Foundation for Family Trauma and Wilderness Safety. The foundation served dual purposes, providing resources for survivors of family abuse and educating people about wilderness safety. Through the foundation, Emma and I connected with others who had experienced similar betrayals by family members. We built a network of support, a chosen family bound by understanding and respect rather than obligation and control. On the 1-year anniversary of our abandonment, Emma suggested something that surprised me. "I want to go camping, Mom," she said over breakfast. "Real camping, the right way." I stared at her, uncertain. "Are you sure, sweetie? We don't have to do that." She nodded firmly. "I don't want to be afraid of the forest forever. And I don't want them to take that away from us too." With careful preparation, proper equipment, and an experienced guide, we returned to the wilderness, not to Blackwood Forest, but to a beautiful national park in Washington. We set up our tent together, built a safe campfire, and sat beneath the stars. "How do you feel?" I asked Emma as we roasted marshmallows. She considered the question thoughtfully. "Proud," she finally answered. "We're survivors, Mom. And now we're explorers too." That camping trip became an annual tradition, our way of reclaiming something that had been tainted by trauma and transforming it into a celebration of our strength and bond. In the years that followed, our lives took shape in ways I never could have imagined during those desperate days in the wilderness. My teaching career flourished. Emma thrived in school, developing a particular interest in environmental science inspired by our experiences. I wrote a book about our ordeal that became a bestseller and helped countless others recognize and escape toxic family dynamics. 5 years after the abandonment, Emma and I stood before a room full of mothers and daughters at our foundation's annual wilderness safety workshop. Now 15, Emma had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman with none of the manipulative tendencies that had characterized my family of origin. "The most important lesson I learned," Emma told the group, "is that you get to choose your path. Not your grandparents, not society, not even your past experiences. You decide who you want to be and what kind of relationships you want to have." As I listened to my daughter's wisdom, I reflected on our journey. The abandonment that was meant to break us had instead broken the chains that had bound me to toxic relationships for decades. In losing the family that had tried to control me, I had found the freedom to become the mother, teacher, and woman I was meant to be. That night, after the workshop, Emma and I walked along Seattle's waterfront, the lights of the city reflecting on the dark water. "Do you ever wonder about them?" Emma asked suddenly. "Grandma and Grandpa, Uncle Ryan?" I considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. I wonder if they've changed, if they understand what they did wrong. But I don't miss them, not really. I miss the idea of what family should be." "But we've found that elsewhere." Emma nodded, linking her arm through mine. "We made our own family with people who actually love us." "Yes," I agreed, "we did." As we turned toward home, I thought about how far we had come from that moment of terrible realization in the clearing, when we discovered we had been abandoned by those who should have protected us. The journey had been painful, the healing slow and sometimes difficult, but we had emerged stronger, wiser, and truly free. And in the end, that was the most powerful revenge of all. What's your story of overcoming betrayal or family trauma? Have you ever had to create boundaries with toxic family members to protect yourself? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of survival and resilience. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing.